everybody. Welcome to this session of our Fall into DigCit Week live stream from the Indiana Learning Partnership. We are so excited for our second partner spotlight session with Capstone Publishing. We are so happy to have Andrea Brinkert. She is the direct sales rep for Central Indiana, Kansas. She's around with Capstone, Pebble Go. We go way back because as a librarian, I always loved their content in our libraries. And then we have a special guest, Tony. Tony is the managing editor of digital content for Capstone. Not a small deal, Tony. That's a pretty big deal. And fun fact, Tony's way into Halloween. He and his whole family are dressing up as the Toy Story gang, and he's got a dog that's going to be Rex. And if I don't see some tweets with that picture of that, I'm going to be disappointed in the whole thing, Tony. So Andrea's going to share with us a little bit about online content publishing, and it's going to be a quick 20 minutes, but I am so excited to have you both here. Thank you so much. Let's take it away with Andrea.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Lena. I am going to today give you a little peek behind the curtain at what kinds of things go into publishing digital content. And Danielle Ziminski, another colleague of mine, is going to join me in a recorded interview. And then Tony's going to join me again towards the end. And we're going to talk about just different things that we consider in the publishing industry for how to make good quality digital content for kids. So I'm going to start in my first slide here. So Kristen Patrick's presentation started off this DigCit live stream this afternoon with free isn't always free. And she did an excellent job of pointing out some of the practical and ethical considerations of why using digital content that is free with students isn't always a good idea, nor is it always legal. And this presentation is going to look a little bit at the question of why isn't digital content free. And this book that you see to the right of me is not a Capstone book. It is published by Learner. But I did hear an interview recently with the author, Chris Barton. He often does school visits. And one of the kids' most common questions is, have you ever made a book about your dog? And that question prompted this new book about how to make a book. How does a book get made? And so Chris's book is focused on the steps to publishing a physical book, but alongside the publishing process for physical materials, there are a number of additional and or parallel steps to publishing digital materials. So a couple of my Capstone colleagues are going to join me today to take a peek behind the curtain at what thoughtful publishing of online content for students entails. And my hope for your takeaway is that you will have fresh reasons to support the ethical use of copyrighted material in your school, including digitally copyrighted material. So we are all Capstone employees, so the examples we're going to use will be of Capstone ebook titles and Pebble Go, Capstone's online elementary research database, but there would be a lot of commonalities across all digital publishers. So joining me today, as I mentioned, are Danielle and Tony, and we're going to go through the following content today. First off, how does a physical book get made into an ebook? Secondly, what goes into publishing and maintaining an online research database for students? Third, what are some things that educators should know about accessibility standards? And then we'll end with some free temporary access, which you can use with permission with students for your DigCit celebrations. So without further ado, let's get right into our interview with Danielle.
So I am here with Danielle Ziminski, a wonderful colleague of mine who works for us in Capstone in our department that works a lot with converting our print books into ebook material. So Danielle, welcome, and can you tell me a little bit about your role at Capstone?
Hi, yeah, I am the pre-media manager at Capstone, and I've been here for 14 years. Our pre-media department manages all of the technical aspects of our books. And so we make sure that they print correctly. We work with our print vendors to, upload files. We also work with all of our recording studios to get the audio recorded for them. We like to have professional audio for all of our ebooks. And then we manage all of our ebook conversions as well. And so we either convert them in-house or we work with outside conversion companies to have those done and do all of the QA process with those. Additionally, we also manage all of the files for our database product as well. So there's a lot of the same sort of files that go into that, but it's another piece of the product that we do. And then one other big piece of what we do is that when we're developing our print books is that we always need to think about the digital version as well. So, years ago, it was always just print everything. And now we have to think about the digital version on the front end to make sure that it's set up correctly and that it will work good for the ebook in the end and platforms that it'll be available on.
Okay. So follow-up question to working well, what are some things that you kind of keep an eye on in terms of, like, if you're creating a print book that's going to be friendly to converting to an ebook, what are some things that you need to think about as you're doing it?
One thing that we do is we want to make sure that all of the text is live text, so it's actually a font, so then it is accessible to our readers. We want to make sure that the fonts are, large enough size. Some of our books, we're not able to do that, but we try to make it so it's as visible, pleasing as possible, and able to be read easily by our struggling readers, especially. Additionally, we add alternate text to our files in the InDesign file, so that flows through to the EPUB. That is another accessibility addition. And so a lot of things like that we're just thinking about, making sure that we're giving meaning to the content within the InDesign file so it flows all the way through to our ebook in the end.
That's great. Well, tell me one thing that you really just love about your job, about working for a publisher, about working with books. What do you like?
It's just fun, honestly. There's just so many fun products that we get to work on every day. That it's great to work on products that help kids read and have fun learning. And we're always working on something different and new, whether, it might be, obviously we're working on books, but, there's always a new type of book or something new and different. We're also working on database work, trying to make our ebooks better all the time. So it's always something new that we're working on, which is always fun.
That's great. So I know we talked a little bit about the different steps that you go through. So let's spend a little time talking about that.
Sure.
So you have a few steps that you go through when you are getting a print book ready to be converted into an ebook. And the first step that you mentioned was creating a script file. So tell me a little bit about what that is and what do you need that for?
Yes. So once we get our book set up, the print book set up how we want it to be, and it's all final, sent to the vendor, we go through creating a script to send to the recording studio. So we need to tell them basically what audio we want them to record and in which order. And it's basically taking that text out of that InDesign file and putting it into a text format only. So they're just reading through the script without, having the images and sidebars and all sorts of different things kind of in there to impact that, which is helpful. It simplifies it for them, and then we tell them which order it needs to be in.
That's great. So you send the script off to a recording studio, and what do they do with the script there? Like, what do they do at the recording studio?
So they take that and the PDF that we provide them, and they will go through and they will do their professionally recorded audio. They'll go through and they'll record it, and then they also go back through and edit it and make sure that everything sounds as it should. They try to make sure that it is read at an appropriate pace as well. And
so these are human readers that they
Yeah.
hire to read the text. So it's a
Yeah.
human reading it at a pace that's appropriate for a reader. Great.
Correct. Yep.
So then after you've got the audio file, then you mentioned you have to create some time codes. So
Yeah.
tell me about how that works.
Yes, so we have to create what's called time codes, and those are really to identify where the word starts and stops. It tells the exact time that it starts and stops, and so then when we put it all together, when you're looking at it through the ebook player, you can see that the word is highlighting at the appropriate time that it's being said. So we need to go through basically and make sure that it starts and stops. It's starting and stopping at the correct moment as well. So
that's great. So how long does it typically take to make sure all the time codes are correct on a typical book?
I would say, that can really vary. It depends on the complexity of the book for sure. I would say probably a half an hour to up to 2 hours potentially. If there's a lot of numbers and more complicated kind of words, that can take a little bit longer because it doesn't always recognize it as easily, and so it's more of a manual task. But usually it's pretty straightforward where we can go through it pretty quickly and review the files.
Okay, great. Well, I think this is a great time to kind of pull up an ebook so we can hear, like, what does that all sound like when it's pulled together. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'll share my sound for sure. And I'm pulling up some slides I put together for Indiana educators to use for free for Digital Citizenship Week. So I've got some books, some ebooks that pertain to digital citizenship concepts. So I'm going to pull up one of these little graphic novels here, and I'm going to play it so that everyone can hear the results of the
Little Red Hen, Video Star, a graphic novel by Steve Fox, illustrated by Otis Frampton.
So that part is the front image.
Welcome to Barnyard Meadows, the quietest town this side of the Sleepy River. There's not much to do
play here, and you can see that
but the townsfolk hardly mind.
And then reading in that read aloud audio, which is that great experience for those kiddos to be able to listen to a real person reading and be able to get that audio experience too as they're following along. So as I'm stopping sharing, we'll just pause right there with the read aloud, and then we're going to talk about formats, because after you've got the time coding all correct and it plays correctly, then you have to convert it to an EPUB file, which is, from what I understand, kind of a standard file type for these kind of ebooks.
Yes, it's standard in the industry. Originally a lot of companies were using PDFs, but we've moved to EPUBs, and so we use the EPUB standard. But we take our print files that we've created, we take the audio and the time codes, and then we basically put them all together in an EPUB format. And an EPUB is a collection of HTML files that's all packaged up into like a nice zip file, which then can be read on multiple platforms and readers now.
Good. Yeah, that was my follow-up question too. So when you've got it in this EPUB file, then it can be read by various kinds of platforms, right? Because they all read EPUB files.
Yes, and since it's a widely supported format, there's multiple places that can go. It's not as not only one place can use that file, which is very nice.
Cool. So talk to me a little bit about the quality assurance process after you've got the file. What do you do to make sure everything works correctly?
Sure, yeah, we take a good look through the file. We look at all of the HTML and the code to make sure that all looks, accurate and how it needs to be. And then we also go through it and make sure that the text looks right. It's positioned as accurate as it can be. Now there is some inconsistencies with an ebook versus the print book because not everything is supported, but for the most part, it does look exactly the same or can look exactly the same. And so we go through it and we make sure that everything looks right, is positioned right. We make sure that the audio and the highlighting works as expected. We like to make sure that the navigational table of contents is working right so you can navigate through the book easily, and all of those things. And so it's just a thorough review of the ebook to make sure that it gets, it's correct when it gets to our customers.
Mm-hmm. So then what happens if you do encounter something that is a little off kilter? How do you fix that before it goes out to people?
Depending on what it is, we might fix it internally. We have staff that, are able to go in and make updates to those. Otherwise, we work with a external company where we let them know what the issue is, and they provide updates to that file, send it back to us, and we do another review before it gets uploaded.
Perfect. And then there's the distribution. So once the file is approved and it all looks good, then what happens?
Then we need to get a cover image for that asset or that title, and then we upload those EPUBs basically to a variety of different platforms. Really, a lot of our just distributors.
So give me an example. It's, of course, Capstone does sell titles directly. That's one of my roles in the company. But how else might a customer encounter a Capstone ebook?
You can find them on Overdrive, Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, a variety of different places. Even Follett and Mac can provide them as well.
Okay, so you can find them in lots of places.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you so much for just walking us through the process of creating an ebook file. I think it's really interesting to hear all of the steps that go into making sure that something works when it's finally online and that kids can read it successfully. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today, Danielle.
You're welcome. I was happy. It was great to do it.
All right. Well, welcome, Tony. Tony Wacholtz is the managing editor for digital content here at Capstone. So, Tony, tell us a little bit about your role at Capstone. What exactly does a managing editor for digital content do?
Thank you. As managing editor of digital content, I oversee the expansion and the maintenance of all the content that you can find in PebbleGo. And that's an educational research database suite for elementary students. I've been with Capstone 16 years now, and every day still, I learn something new about the topics that we cover.
Cool. So what is a database in broad strokes?
So a database is an online collection of articles and information compiled on a variety of topics. So for example, in PebbleGo and PebbleGo Next, we have hundreds of articles on topics ranging from animals and health to states and social studies. A database is useful in efficiently finding desired and up-to-date information in a platform that's easy to navigate.
Awesome. So how do article topics get chosen and to be included in PebbleGo?
It's a good question. There's a number of ways we come up with articles for the databases. Those would include the state and national curriculum standards. There's a number of trending high interest topics that we do depending on what's happening in the world. And we also get a ton of wonderful suggestions from educators. So
Cool.
once we have those topics in hands, we always try to pair them with knowledgeable authors as well.
I pulled up that example that you were going to talk about here.
Great. So yeah, the best stories come from the authors who have the experience in those topics and are invested in the topic. So for example, we recently released a PebbleGo Next article for grades 3 through 5, and it's on the Japanese incarceration in World War II. The author that we were able to hire for this article had family members who were held in incarceration camps during the war. Her detailed depictions and the authentic voice that she had made the topic that much more real and impactful. It was incredible.
So then on the technical side, articles include embedded dramatic read aloud, similar to the ebooks. So there is some of that same time coding that goes into PebbleGo articles, correct?
Yes, and Danielle in the video summed it up really well. So I don't need to reiterate on that part, but on the database side, one difference is that the content is constantly being updated. And so we have to take into account the time it takes to have the natural voice audio completed and be able to QA all of it.
Okay.
And just as a quick side note, the natural voice and highlighting are two of my 5-year-old son's favorite features. He likes to point along and follow the highlighting as he's learning, usually about sharks or snakes.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about Section 508 and WCAG 2.0 AA standards. So without getting too far into the weeds, these are standards that speak to accessibility so that learners of different abilities can access online content in equitable ways to students who do not have atypical learning styles. So things like colorblindness, vision impairment, hearing, physical impairment, And we've done some pretty extensive work here at Capstone on Pebble Go and Pebble Go Next to make sure that all students could use our database. So can you talk to me about some of the examples of what kind of work goes into this accessibility?
Absolutely. And this is a big undertaking, an ongoing undertaking. It's just very rewarding knowing that each piece that we do for this is a step toward making our content accessible to all students. The content and the UI UX enhancements made are for things, as you mentioned, for color blindness, vision impairment, or hearing or physical impairment. But just a couple of quick examples. And Danielle touched on this about having alt text for the screen readers. So if you think of all the images that we have and other component pieces that in the databases, all of those have alt text. The nicely paced audio, which supports struggling readers and English language learners. And then we also have contrast ratios for our range maps to help students with color blindness.
Awesome. So for those of you involved in selecting digital materials to use with students, the federal government has some requirements that online materials purchased with federal monies provide the highest level of accessibility that can reasonably be provided. So you wouldn't have to become an expert in the very detailed technical specifications, but accessibility is something that you should have in mind to ask about when selecting digital materials for purchase, especially with federal funds. So thanks, Tony, so much for the work that you do as editor of some pretty great digital content. And we've talked with Danielle and Tony today, but there are a number of other departments, of course, that are involved in publishing online content. So one big takeaway, hopefully, from this session should be that it takes a number of roles and a good amount of work to produce good quality digital content for students. So one of the whys behind the digital citizenship concept of citing sources and making sure you have permission to use someone's work, and indeed even the entire system of copyright law, is to protect publishers and creators of content so they can continue to create fact-checked, vetted, educationally appropriate materials for students. I promised that you would have some free access. So up on the screen, you will see an access to a Google slide deck. In this case, you do have permission to use the free temporary resources Capstone is making available. These will be available until October 30th. There's a bit.ly with a targeted selection of read aloud articles and ebooks related to digital citizenship topics. I hope you enjoy exploring digital citizenship with your students, and I wish you a happy Digital Citizenship Week.
Thank you both so much. What a treat to have you here with us today, sharing the why behind why it's so important that as educators, we are modeling quality use of intellectual property and online content for our students and really setting that example, because the work that goes into it is obviously deeper than we may have imagined, much more extensive, and you do it right. And I'm going to leave up the need for those accessible materials for all of my students to you, because you're doing a phenomenal job, and there's no need for me to try to do that on my own. So thank you both so much, and happy Halloween, Tony. We'll see you guys at the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.